Hey guys, tonight we ditch the memory foam and goose down for something decidedly more mineral. You're standing on the edge of a vast, moon-washed desert, the Nile, a silent, dark ribbon in the distance. The air hangs still and warm, thick with the scent of baked earth and distant muddy water. Cicadas drone a relentless lullaby. Inside a modest mud brick house, the air is even closer, pressing in like a warm blanket. There's no gentle sigh of air conditioning, no soft glow of a digital clock, just the profound, echoing quiet of a world asleep under stars impossibly bright. You feel the grit of fine sand between your toes, a constant companion in this ancient land. You crave rest, deep rest, after a day hauling stone under a relentless sun, or coaxing life from the fertile black soil along the riverbanks. Your muscles ache, your eyes are heavy, but as you move towards your sleeping mat, you realize something crucial is missing. That comforting squish, that supportive cradle for your Wea. Forget it. Because surviving a day building pyramids or dodging Nile crocodiles is one thing, but honestly, you probably wouldn't survive the night without the right head support. And trust me, it's not what you're picturing. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Where in the world are you resting your head tonight? Drop a comment with your location and local time. It's always fascinating to see where the journey finds everyone. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey. You shuffle across the compacted earth floor, the coolness a slight relief on your bare soles. Your sleeping space is simple, a woven reed mat, maybe a rough linen sheet if you're fortunate. You lower yourself down, the reeds whispering beneath your weight. Instinctively, you reach for something to place under your head, a primal desire for elevation, for separation from the ground, for just a little dignity in slumber. But your hand doesn't find plush down or yielding foam. Instead, your fingers brush against something cool, unyielding, stone, or perhaps smooth hard wood. It's a headrest, not a pillow. A headrest. The fundamental difference hits you immediately. This object isn't about sinking in. It's about you lie back, gingerly positioning the bony ridge just behind your ear onto the cold, curved surface. It's jarring, alien. Your modern spine, accustomed to cradle and contour, rebels for a moment. This is it, you think? The smooth, cool surface pressing firmly against your skull. This is comfort? The mainstream historical fact hits you right between the temples. Ancient Egyptians, from mighty pharaohs entombed with golden riches to humble farmers sleeping in mud brick homes, overwhelmingly used rigid headrests made of stone, wood, ceramic, or even ivory. Forget feathers or straw. Elevation came courtesy of carved rock. It feels less like bedtime and more like a mild form of acupuncture applied directly to your temporal bone. But why? Why subject yourself to this nightly negotiation with hardness? Comfort, in our squishy, sink-into-it sense, seems utterly absent. The quirky tidbit whispers an answer. Some Egyptologists suggest these headrests weren't just about holding your head up, but potentially keeping things out. Imagine the creepy crawlies, scorpions seeking warmth, opportunistic beetles, the dreaded sand flea, elevating your head just those crucial few inches off the dusty floor might have felt like a vital defensive perimeter in the nightly battle against nature's smaller, More annoying infantry. A stone moat for your precious scalp. Think about that the next time you fluff your pillow against a stray dust mite. And then there's the scholarly murmur, the one that hangs in the still air like incense smoke. Historians still argue whether these objects were primarily practical tools, potent magical talismans, or powerful status symbols. Was it about coolness in the sweltering heat, protection from ground pests, or was it imbued with deeper meaning, a physical anchor for the soul during sleep's perilous journey? The debate simmers, unresolved. Much like the low grumble of a distant hippo in the Nile reeds, you're trying very hard not to think about as you try to find a position where your jawbone isn't screaming. You shift slightly, the hard curve pressing into a new spot. The desert night stretches on, vast and silent. Your quest to understand Egyptian sleep has begun, quite literally, with a pain in the neck. Remember that crocodile dung sunscreen? Yeah, this might actually be less comfortable. That initial shock of cold, unyielding stone against your temple lingers. You lie rigid at first, convinced sleep is impossible, perched on this minimalist sculpture masquerading as bedding. Every tiny shift feels amplified. The curve of the headrest digs into the mastoid bone behind your ear, a pressure point you never knew existed until tonight. You try tilting your chin up slightly, only to feel a new strain creep into the muscles along the front of your neck. Lowering your chin brings the hard ridge into uncomfortable contact with the base of your skull. It's a nightly geometry puzzle, and you're the unwilling piece trying to fit. Forget sinking into oblivion. This is about finding the least intolerable point of contact. The mainstream historical fact becomes painfully clear. These weren't occasional novelties. Headrests were ubiquitous, found in homes from the humblest village to the grandest palace. Crafted from whatever material was available. Limestone, basalt, alabaster for the stone versions. Acacia, sycamore fig, or tamarisk wood carved smooth. Even ceramic or faience for less common, potentially ceremonial pieces. Comfort, as we define it with give and contour, simply wasn't the design brief. The goal was elevation. Pure, simple, often brutal elevation. You imagine generations of Egyptians developing a specific musculature in their necks, a tolerance born of nightly necessity, a physiological adaptation to sleeping on what feels like a particularly unforgiving doorstop. So you grit your teeth, metaphorically, because clenching your jaw just makes the pressure on your skull worse, and try to lean into the experience. Why endure this? The practical reasons start to coalesce in the drowsy haze of your frustration. The air is thick and hot, clinging like damp linen. Your modern pillow, you realize with a pang of longing, would be a sweaty, stifling trap in this climate. The stone, however, it's undeniably cool. Not comfortable, but cool. It wicks away the heat radiating from your head, a small mercy against the enveloping warmth of the night. The quirky, slightly grim tidbit surfaces. Some theories suggest these headrests might have helped keep your head above, well, the nightly effluvia. Houses weren't hermetically sealed. Dust, insects, maybe even the occasional curious rodent or snake seeking warmth could be deterred by that few inches of elevation. Your head becomes a citadel on a plinth, separated from the potentially lively floor. It's a defensive posture for slumber. Think of it as ancient pest control, a physical firewall between your ears and whatever scuttles in the dark. Less sweet dreams, more strategic elevation against the creepy-crawly horde. You almost miss the crocodile dung sunscreen. At least that was presumably applied out. What was it just about coolness and critters? This is where the scholarly whispers grow louder, cutting through your internal grumbling. Historians still argue whether the ancient Egyptians actually found these headrests comfortable. Did generations simply get used to the hardness? Their definition of restful, fundamentally altered by necessity and culture? Or was there a genuine, learned comfort in the specific support they provided, aligning the spine in a way we've forgotten? Maybe it was like wearing stiff, new leather shoes, unbearable at first, but eventually molding to the wearer, or the wearer molding to them. Perhaps the discomfort we feel is purely a product of our modern softness, our spines weakened by plush mattresses and feather pillows. The debate simmers. Was this technology born purely of harsh environment and practical need? Or was there an aesthetic, even a physical preference, for this particular form of support? Did they drift off feeling cradled, or merely sus? As you finally find a position where the pressure becomes a dull, almost ignorable ache, a grudging acceptance starts to seep in. The coolness is pleasant. The air circulates around your elevated neck. The reed mat beneath you rustles softly. The unyielding surface forces stillness. Maybe, just maybe, sleep isn't impossible. It just requires a different kind of surrender. Your neck still complains, a low throb echoing the distant drums of a temple ceremony you can't quite hear. But the profound fatigue of your ancient body begins to pull you down, towards the dark. Despite the rock beneath your ear, the craftsmanship you notice vaguely before slipping under is surprisingly smooth. How did they carve stone so precisely? The question floats away unanswered as the first tendrils of sleep, hard-won, finally take hold. That grudging surrender to the stone's embrace last night feels like a distant dream now. Today, your fingers trace the surface of a different kind of headrest. Wood. Not just any wood, but acacia, dense and honey-colored, carved with a patience that borders on reverence. The coolness is still there, but it's different. Less stark, more organic. There's a faint scent lingering in the grain, something earthy and resinous, a whisper of the living tree it once was. You turn it over in your hands, feeling the weight, the surprising solidity. This isn't a rough-hewn lump. It's made. Curves flow into planes. The central column supporting the cradle for your head feels sturdy, intentional. The base is broad and stable, designed not to tip when you inevitably shift in the night, trying to escape the persistent ache behind your left ear. The mainstream historical fact settles in your palm. While stone headrests existed, especially earlier on, and for those who could afford the labor, wood became the most common material for everyday use across ancient Egyptian society. Acacia, sycamore fig, and tamarisk were favored. Woods durable enough to withstand nightly use, yet workable enough to carve into surprisingly elegant forms. This object in your hands isn't merely functional. It's an artifact of skilled craft, a testament to the carpenter's adze and chisel. It speaks of time invested, of transforming a stubborn branch or plank into something meant to cradle the most vulnerable part of a person for hours every night. You run a thumb over the polished surface where countless heads have rested, feeling the subtle undulations worn smooth by skin, hair, and time. The craftsmanship is undeniable, a quiet rebuttal to your initial assumption of primitive discomfort. The artistry deepens as you examine another piece, this one belonging to someone far wealthier. Ivory, not the bleached white of modern piano keys, but a warm, creamy hue, dense and cool to the touch. It glows faintly in the low lamplight. This is no simple curved platform. Delicate lotus petals are incised along the supporting column. The head cradle itself might be subtly shaped, perhaps mimicking the curve of a goose's neck or the protective arc of a vulture's wing. Here's the quirky, fascinating tidbit. Much of this ivory likely came not from elephants, but from hippopotamus canines. Hippos, those grumpy river-dwelling tanks, were hunted not just for meat or hide, but for these massive, curved teeth that could be carved with astonishing detail. Imagine the journey from the dangerous Nile marshes where a hippo was brought down to the skilled hands of a carver who transformed a fearsome weapon into an object meant for serene rest, adorned with symbols of rebirth and protection. The incongruity is almost laughable. The tooth of a creature synonymous with chaotic destruction, meticulously shaped to cradle a sleeper's head, etched with images of tranquility. It's a nightly paradox, resting on a nightstand. But what did these symbols mean? What guided the carver's hand beyond pure aesthetics? This is where the lines blur, and the scholarly debate murmurs like a distant conversation in a temple workshop. Historians still argue whether the intricate patterns and motifs found on higher-end headrests, the lotus flowers symbolizing rebirth, the protective eye of Horus, geometric patterns echoing cosmic order, were primarily decorative, deeply apotropaic, warding off evil, or served a more complex ritual purpose, especially considering these objects often accompanied the dead into the afterlife. Was the lotus on the column just a pretty flourish, or a deliberate invocation of renewal for the sleeper, a mini rebirth every morning? Did the carver believe the precise angles and curves channeled protective energies, shielding the vulnerable sleeper from the demons believed to roam the night air? Or was it simply a display of wealth and status, the equivalent of monogramming your pillowcase with pure hippo ivory? The debate is layered, much like the varnish on the wood you hold. Some see pure symbolism, others see potent magic, and many see a blend, impossible for us to fully untangle. The carpenter knew the wood's grain. The ivory carver understood the tooth's density. But did they consciously imbue each stroke with meaning beyond beauty? As your fingers trace the cool, smooth lotus petals on the ivory column, the question hangs in the air, as tangible as the scent of sawdust and linseed oil that must have filled the ancient workshops where these nightly companions were born. The craftsmanship demands respect, even as your neck muscles twinge in anticipation of another night perched on this beautiful, unyielding art. At least the hippo ivory won't try to bite you in your sleep. Probably. The cool ivory under your fingertips, etched with lotus petals that feel like frozen silk, suddenly seems less like a luxurious inconvenience and more like a loaded artifact. That intricate carving isn't just decoration, it's armor. You lower yourself onto your sleeping mat, the wood or stone headrest waiting beside you, transformed in your perception. Its unyielding surface isn't merely a physical support, it's a metaphysical shield. You gingerly position your head, the familiar pressure point blooming behind your ear. But now your mind races with the why beyond the cool stone or smooth wood. The mainstream historical fact crystallizes like desert dew. Headrests were deeply embedded in Egyptian spirituality and magic. They weren't just furniture. They were guardians. Spells from the pyramid texts and coffin texts explicitly invoke the headrest's protection. Chapter 166 of the Book of the Dead, often inscribed on headrests buried with the dead or recited over them, is chillingly direct. Raise yourself, Osiris. Lift up your head. Your enemies are overthrown. You shall not be decapitated, and your head shall never be taken from you. This object under your skull is a bulwark against decapitation, literal and spiritual, by the demons haunting the perilous night and the treacherous journey through the duat, the underworld. It's less a pillow, more a magical keystone holding your very being together while you're unconscious and vulnerable. Comfort, secondary. Survival, non-negotiable. The rituals begin, blurring the line between bedtime routine and sacred rite. Perhaps you murmur a short invocation learned from childhood, a whispered plea to the protective lioness goddess Sekhmet or the dwarf god Bes, whose grotesque, apotropaic face might even be carved onto the headrest's base, warding off nightmares with his own fierce visage. Maybe you touch a small amulet, an eye of Horus carved from faience, cool and smooth, tucked under the headrest itself, charging it with protective energy. Here's the quirky, slightly unsettling tidbit. Some texts and images suggest Egyptians believed certain demons or malevolent forces specifically targeted sleepers through their headrest. If not properly protected, think less monster under the bed and more malevolent entity attempting to infiltrate your dreams via the carved ivory platform currently cradling your temporal lobe. The headrest wasn't just a barrier. It was a potential conduit needing constant magical reinforcement. Forget counting sheep. They were busy fortifying their cranial fortress against spectral decapitators. You shift slightly, the hard curve pressing firmly, feeling suddenly grateful for the weight and solidity beneath you. Is that ridge digging into your neck, or is it the physical anchor for a protective spell woven centuries before foam was invented? The line feels deliciously thin, but how deeply did this belief permeate? Did the farmer sleeping on a simple wooden headrest whisper the same spells as the priest with an ivory masterpiece? This is where the scholarly debate whispers through the protective incantations. Historians still argue whether the profound magical significance ascribed to headrests, especially the elaborate decapitation protection spells, was a belief held universally across Egyptian society or primarily an elite, funerary-focused concept that trickled down into more generalized apotropaic practices for the living. Was every nightly head placement on that cool stone accompanied by a genuine fear of nocturnal dismemberment by demons? Or was it for many more of a comforting habit, a cultural echo of the powerful spells reserved for the dead and the wealthy? Did the average Egyptian truly believe a poorly protected headrest could lead to spiritual decapitation? Or was it simply better safe than sorry, woven into the fabric of bedtime? The debate lingers, unresolved, much like the fading echo of your own whispered protective phrase. As you finally settle, the hard surface feels different. It's no longer just an uncomfortable perch. It's a fulcrum between worlds, a tiny, personal monument raised against the consuming darkness. The coolness against your skull isn't just physical. It feels charged, watchful. The cicadas drone outside. The Nile murmurs in the distance, and beneath your head, a slab of stone or carved wood hums with silent, ancient power, promising that whatever shadows move in the night, your head will still be attached come dawn. Remember the crocodile dung sunscreen? Utilitarian. This is existential. Sweet dreams? More like safe skulls. Let the demons gnash their teeth elsewhere. The silent promise of the headrest beneath you feels less comforting now, replaced by a prickling awareness of the dark. It's not just the physical dark of a moonless Egyptian night. It's the thick, suffocating dark of the unseen. The protective spells hum in your memory, but they also paint targets in the shadows. Every rustle in the reeds outside isn't just the wind. It could be the shuffle of leathery feet. Every distant animal cry isn't just nature. It might be a demon's mocking laugh. The mainstream historical fact settles like a chill. Ancient Egyptians lived in a world saturated with malevolent forces, especially at night. Sleep wasn't just rest. It was a vulnerable state, a temporary death where your Ka, life force, could wander and your body lay open to attack. Demons like the terrifying Shezmu, often depicted as a lion-headed presser of grapes who might press your head instead, or the serpentine Apep, embodiment of chaos, weren't just myths. They were perceived as tangible threats lurking beyond the lamplight. Nightmares weren't bad dreams. They were literal assaults by these entities, attempting to steal your breath, sap your strength, or worse, drag your soul into the terrifying duat prematurely. Your headrest, cool and hard, is your frontline trench in this nightly war. That slight elevation, it's not just about scorpions. It's about putting vital distance between your vulnerable orifices, mouth, nose, ears, and the miasmic ground where demons were thought to crawl. You keep your lips tightly closed, just in case. The rituals extend beyond whispered spells. Glancing around your dim sleeping area, you see the defenses. A small, crudely carved figure of Bes, the dwarf god with a leonine mane and protruding tongue, grins fiercely from a niche in the wall. His grotesque appearance wasn't meant to be cute. It was apotropaic magic 101. Ugliness to repel ugliness. Fierceness to counter fierceness. Perhaps a simple clay bowl of water sits nearby, not for drinking, but as a trap. The quirky, unsettling tidbit. Some believed certain demons, particularly those causing sleep paralysis or suffocating nightmares, were repelled by their own reflection or could be captured in water. But how deep did this dread run? Did everyone genuinely feel this besieged every single night? This is where the scholarly debate creeps in like a draft under the door. Historians still argue whether the pervasive fear of nocturnal demons was a constant, gnawing terror for the average Egyptian, shaping every bedtime with palpable anxiety, or whether it was more like background cultural static, a known danger acknowledged through ritual and symbol, but not necessarily causing nightly panic for most. Was the farmer muttering the spell against Shezmu genuinely terrified of being grape-pressed in his sleep? Or was it simply a comforting habit, a cultural reflex passed down like saying, "Bless you," after a sneeze? Did the elaborate demonology of the priesthood and funerary texts translate directly into the nightly fears of the woman grinding grain or the fisherman mending nets? Or was the darkness simply darker, quieter, and therefore inherently more frightening, with the rituals providing a sense of control, a way to name the nameless dread? The debate simmers. Some see a populace deeply traumatized by belief. Others see pragmatic people using symbolic tools to manage the inherent vulnerability of sleep. As you lie rigid, every creak of the house timbers amplifying your heartbeat, the distinction feels academic. The fear, whether constant or occasional, ritualized or raw, shaped the object beneath your head. That unyielding curve isn't just stone. It's petrified anxiety, carved by generations who knew the night held teeth. You close your eyes tighter, focusing on the solid pressure against your skull. The headrest is there. Bess is on duty. The water bowl is waiting. Outside, a jackal howls. Or maybe something else. Remember the crocodile dung sunscreen? At least that smelled bad enough to keep everything away. Tonight you just hope the demons are allergic to ivory. The jackal's cry fades, swallowed by a deeper silence. Dawn's first gray fingers haven't yet crept through the window, but the suffocating dread of the demon-haunted midnight begins to loosen its grip. Your heart still pounds a frantic rhythm against your ribs, a leftover tremor from a nightmare where leathery wings brushed your face. But gradually, as the solid reality of the headrest reasserts itself beneath your skull, you become aware of a different sensation. Not fear this time, but a peculiar kind of relief. The crick in your neck from yesterday's hauling? It's less. The persistent ache between your shoulder blades? It feels looser. You tentatively roll your head just a fraction on the unyielding curve. There's a stretch, a subtle release along the vertebrae. The mainstream historical fact nudges your drowsy mind. Beyond demons and coolness, Egyptians believed these headrests offered genuine physical benefits. Medical texts like the Ebers Papyrus discuss the importance of the rigid support, they claimed, kept the head elevated and the spine straight, preventing stiffness and promoting better breathing. It wasn't just about surviving the night. It was about waking up functional. Imagine the overseer barking orders at the quarry at sunrise. You needed your neck muscles ready, not knotted like tangled fishing nets. The headrest was ergonomic technology, millennia before the word existed. That persistent pressure point behind your ear? Maybe it was hitting some ancient acupressure node they intuitively understood. You shift again, deliberately this time, seeking that stretch. Okay, maybe it's not comfortable, but there's a certain integrity to this posture. Your modern spine, perpetually hunched over screens, feels vaguely insulted by the comparison. The evidence isn't just in texts, it's frozen in time. Think of those tomb paintings, those meticulous snapshots of daily life. How are the figures depicted sleeping? Almost always on their side, head firmly perched on a headrest, neck elongated, spine remarkably straight. No hunching, no crumpling. The quirky tidbit emerges. Some Egyptologists, armed with magnifying glasses and perhaps too much coffee, have analyzed these sleeping postures like forensic scientists. They note the consistent alignment, ear, shoulder, hip, often forming a clean line. Was this artistic convention, or was it reflecting a culturally ingrained ideal of correct rest? Did they have posture police for sleep? Probably not. But the visual record suggests a society deeply aware of the body's mechanics, even in repose. Your own attempt to mimic the painted posture feels awkward, like trying to copy a yoga pose from a faded hieroglyph. Your shoulder protests, your hip feels exposed, but you persist, driven by a strange curiosity. Is this the secret? Is the discomfort merely the price paid for spinal salvation? You picture generations of Egyptians developing necks like temple columns, posture so impeccable they could balance a water jug on their head while sleeping on a block of granite. Exaggeration? Maybe. But the potential kernel of biomechanical truth is there, buried under layers of stone and millennia. But was this health angle a conscious design principle or just a happy accident born of necessity? This is where the scholarly debate stretches its own academic muscles. Historians still argue whether the purported health benefits of Egyptian headrests were a primary motivation for their design and use, or merely a secondary justification, discovered after the objects became culturally entrenched for other reasons: magic, coolness, pest control. Did a wise physician one day decree, "Pharaoh, thy people slouch, carve them stone neck braces"? Or did people using headrests for spiritual and practical reasons simply notice, over generations, that they woke up with fewer aches? Was the straight spine a deliberate goal, or a fortunate byproduct of an object designed to keep your head off the demon-infested floor and magically attached to your shoulders? The debate hinges on interpreting ambiguous evidence. Tomb paintings showing alignment, medical texts mentioning posture, but no explicit design manual stating, "Make it thus to prevent cervical strain." It's possible the health aspect was woven into the existing magical and practical tapestry, another thread reinforcing the headrest's essential role. As the first true light of dawn finally stains the horizon ochre, you carefully ease yourself up off the mat. Your neck does feel different. Not pampered, but supported. Less like it's been coddled, more like it's been set right. The stiffness from yesterday is muted. Maybe the demons didn't get you, and maybe, just maybe, your spine whispers a grudging thank you to the lump of acacia wood now sitting innocently beside your mat. Comfort is overrated, it seems. Functionality, however, has its own quiet rewards. Remember the crocodile dung sunscreen? Probably didn't do wonders for the skin, but hey, at least you didn't get sunburned. This headrest thing? It might be onto something. Now, about that hip ache. The grudging respect for your spine's newfound alignment wars with the persistent memory of that cool stone pressing into your skull. As the Egyptian sun climbs, transforming the Nile Valley into a shimmering oven, the logic behind the headrest's brutal minimalism starts to crystallize like salt on baked mud. You're not just lying on your mat anymore. You're conducting a sweaty, involuntary experiment in thermal physics. Imagine sinking your head into goose down or even simple stuffed linen right now. The mainstream historical fact hits you like a blast of furnace air. In Upper Egypt's relentless heat, especially during the sweltering summer months, Akhet, the inundation season, ironically bringing humidity with the flood, breathable materials and heat dissipation weren't luxuries. They were survival. Your modern pillow, for all its contouring gel beads and memory foam magic, would be a suffocating slet-log swamp by midnight. That unyielding stone or dense wood, it's a heat sink. Your body heat transfers into it, not gets trapped under you. The smooth surface allows air to circulate around your neck and scalp, a tiny, vital convection current in the otherwise stagnant air of your mud brick home. You run a hand over the cool stone surface waiting beside your mat. Even now, hours before bedtime, it feels noticeably cooler than the ambient air. It's passive cooling tech, carved by necessity millennia before the first electric fan sputtered to life. Comfort might be debatable, but survival in this climate? The headrest wins, hands down. Or heads up, rather. The design itself whispers of climate adaptation. Notice the curves? They minimize surface contact. Your head isn't smothered. It's perched like a bird on a branch, maximizing airflow. The central column elevates the head cradle, creating space beneath for Well, more air. The quirky, practical tidbit: some Egyptologists suggest this space might have also been utilized to hold small sachets of dried, fragrant herbs. Chamomile, lavender, or mint. Not just for their calming scent, but because the slight elevation allowed the aromatic vapors to rise naturally around the sleeper's head. Think of it: ancient aromatherapy combined with passive cooling, all engineered into a single hard object. The scent of dried Nile mint mingling with the coolness of the stone as you drift off. A small sensory oasis in the heat. It's a far cry from the cloying humidity that would cling to fabric. You almost feel sorry for your future self, dreaming of plush pillows that would currently feel like warm, damp dish rags strapped to your face. The headrest isn't fighting for comfort. It's fighting against the environment's attempt to smother you in your own sweat. And it's winning, one cool point of contact at a time. But was this thermal advantage the primary driver, or just a happy consequence? This is where the practicality debate gets steamy. Historians still argue whether the Egyptians consciously designed headrests primarily as cooling devices, prioritizing thermal regulation above all other factors, including what we'd call comfort, or whether the cooling effect was a beneficial side effect of an object designed for other reasons. Elevation for pest control, rigidity for magical protection, or even just the limitations of available materials and technology. Did they gather around and say, "We need something hard and non-absorbent to keep our heads cool"? Or did they use stone and wood because it was durable and readily available, and only later appreciate the cooling purpose? Did they prefer the cool hardness specifically because of the climate, actively choosing it over potentially softer but hotter alternatives? The evidence is circumstantial. Tomb paintings show the headrests. Medical texts mention posture. Magical spells invoke protection. But no papyrus scroll reads, Instruction 14, Make thy headrest of smooth stone, for verily it sucketh away the heat of thine head most excellently. The debate simmers, much like the heat haze rising off the desert beyond your doorway. Some scholars see ingenious climate adaptation as the core design principle. Others see an object fulfilling multiple needs, with cooling being one significant, perhaps even discovered benefit. As the sun finally dips below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery streaks, you eye the headrest with less trepidation. The air, while cooling, still holds the day's warmth like a blanket. The thought of anything soft and insulating makes you shudder. Tonight, the cool, unyielding kiss of stone doesn't seem like an imposition. It feels like a lifeline. You lower your head. The pressure point flares, familiar and sharp, but beneath it, the blessed coolness spreads. A small victory against the lingering heat. Comfort? Maybe not, but relief? Deep, primal relief. Remember the crocodile dung sunscreen? Probably didn't breathe well either. This headrest? It lets your scalp breathe. Small mercies under an Egyptian sky. The cool stone offers its nightly relief, a small island against the heat. But as your eyes adjust to the gloom, you notice the headrest beside your sleeping mat isn't the only one in Egypt tonight. Far from it. Yours is simple, sturdy acacia wood, sanded smooth in patches, bearing the nicks and scrapes of years, maybe generations of use. Functional, unadorned. Now, picture the headrest resting mere miles away, beneath the shaved, oiled scalp of Pharaoh, in the echoing vastness of his palace. The mainstream historical fact gleams like desert sun on gold. Headrests were universal, but their form screamed social hierarchy louder than a marketplace argument. Your wooden perch? That's the economy model. Pharaoh's? That's a celestial throne for the skull. Imagine solid gold, hammered and polished until it reflects the flickering torchlight like a miniature or gleaming ebony, inlaid with intricate patterns of turquoise, lapis lazuli, and carnelian. Chips of the night sky and the desert's fiery heart pressed into service. Ivory, not just hippo tooth, but perhaps genuine elephant tusk, carved into sinuous forms of protective deities. A lion-headed Sekhmet snarling silently on the base. The dwarf Bez contorted in protective dance along the central column. Precious stones might glint where your head touches, cold and hard even against royal skin. The craftsmanship isn't just skilled, it's divine, reserved for the god-king who needed his sleep, guarded by the literal wealth of kingdoms and the fiercest symbols of protection the artisans could conjure. Your headrest keeps scorpions away. Pharaoh's, theoretically, keeps cosmic chaos at bay. The difference isn't just material, it's spiritual weight. Your simple wooden rest might have a faint protective symbol scratched onto the base. A simple wedgette eye, perhaps, or a crude Bess figure. Pharaoh's is a portable temple. Spells from the pyramid texts, potent enough to navigate the duat, might be meticulously incised in tiny hieroglyphs along the ivory curve cradling his sacred head. The quirky, almost absurd tidbit. Some of these royal headrests found in tombs, like Tutankhamun's famous ebony and ivory example, show virtually no signs of wear. Were they used in life, or were they created solely as perfect, magical guardians for the eternal sleep of death? Did Pharaoh actually rest his divine neck on a slab of gold and lapis? Or did he, in his private chamber, use something slightly less monumental? The image of the young king fidgeting on a literal block of gem-encrusted ebony, trying to find a spot where his ear didn't press directly onto a carved lapis scarab, is both comical and strangely human. Maybe even gods on earth appreciated a slightly worn spot on the acacia. The debate whispers, was the discomfort worth the divine statement? Was a gold headrest, fundamentally still a hard, unyielding platform, really any better for the royal cervical spine than your humble acacia block? Or was it perhaps worse, heavier and colder? Did the intricate carvings, while magically potent, create uncomfortable pressure points unknown to the smooth, worn surface of a commoner's rest? Was the value purely in the material and the magic, leaving the actual experience of sleep remarkably similar across the social spectrum? A nightly negotiation with hardness, just on a vastly different budget. The argument persists. Some suggest the elite could have used softer padding occasionally. Evidence is scant. Others maintain the rigid form was non-negotiable due to its magical and cultural significance, regardless of status. Perhaps the greatest luxury wasn't comfort, but the absolute certainty that your headrest was armed with the most potent spells and crafted by the finest hands, ensuring your head stayed attached and your soul protected, whether from demons or the sheer envy of lesser men. As you shift on your mat, the familiar pressure point flaring on your simple wood, you glance towards the unseen palace. Pharaoh, too, lies suspended between earth and sky, his divine head resting on a fortune, his neck likely just as stiff as yours come dawn. The material gleams, the spells shimmer, but the fundamental human experience, the search for rest on an unyielding surface, feels strangely equalizing. Remember the crocodile dung sunscreen? Probably smelled the same on a farmer or a vizier. Royalty might gild the cage, but the neck still feels the bars. Sleep well, Your Majesty. Hope the lapis doesn't leave a mark. The tomb door seals with a final, echoing thud of stone on stone, plunging the scribe and his headrest into perfect darkness. Centuries dissolve like sand through an hourglass. Now, you stand not in ancient Egypt, but in the dry, electric air of a modern museum storeroom. Or perhaps hunched over in the blinding sunlight of an archaeological dig. The scent of ancient dust is thick, stirred up by careful brushes. Your fingers, protected by thin cotton gloves, hover over an object emerging from the tawny soil. It's not gold, not lapis, but simple, dense wood, dark, cracked by millennia, yet undeniably familiar. The curve is there, the central column, the broad base. A headrest, the mainstream historical fact, hits with the weight of the desert itself. Countless headrests, from crude stone lumps to exquisite ivory masterpieces, have been unearthed across Egypt, offering silent, powerful testimony to their universal role. Think of Howard Carter, his hands trembling, not over gold, yet, but over the simple wooden headrest found in a lesser chamber of Tutankhamun's tomb, before the glories of the antechamber blinded the world. Or picture the excavators at Deir el-Medina, the workman's village, finding headrests in modest mud-brick homes, worn smooth by generations of artisans who built the pharaoh's tombs. Each discovery is a direct line back to a nightly ritual, a physical echo of a million sleeps. This isn't just artifact, it's intimacy, preserved in wood and stone. The context tells the story louder than any inscription. Finding a headrest nestled beside a simple reed mat in a worker's house at Amarna speaks volumes about daily necessity. Discovering one placed reverently beside a mummy in a rock-cut tomb at Abydos shouts its eternal significance. The quirky, poignant tidbit. Some tombs, like those of middle-class officials, reveal multiple headrests buried with a single individual. Was it backup for eternity? Sentimental attachment to a favorite? Or perhaps different headrests for different symbolic or magical purposes in the afterlife? One for protection, another for coolness in the fiery realms of the duat. Imagine packing spare pillows for hell. The sheer ordinariness of finding them in domestic rubbish heaps, broken but not discarded, underscores how utterly essential they were. Repaired, reused, finally tossed only when beyond salvage. They weren't treasured museum pieces. They were tools of rest, as common and vital as a cooking pot. You carefully lift the wooden headrest from the soil. It feels dense, surprisingly heavy for its size. A deep groove is worn into the cradle, the ghostly impression of a specific skull, a specific life, pressed into the grain. Whose head rested here? A farmer dreaming of the Nile's rise? A potter fretting over a kiln firing? The silence holds the answer. But what do these silent objects say about change? This is where the scholarly debate dusts off its trowel. Historians still argue fiercely about what the evolution of headrest styles, from the earliest, cruder stone forms in the pre-dynastic period to the elaborate New Kingdom designs and their eventual decline, actually signifies. Does a shift from heavy stone to lighter, more ornate wood and ivory reflect technological advancement, changing aesthetic tastes, or a dilution of the original magical potency? Does the gradual simplification of forms in the late period mean headrests were losing their spiritual importance, becoming merely practical, or was it simply economic downturn? Was the basic concept so ingrained that stylistic changes were just surface ripples? The evidence lies in the layers. An early dynastic headrest might be a brutalist slab of basalt. A Middle Kingdom example shows elegant curves in sycamore fig. A late period one might be crudely copied in cheaper wood. Do these shifts map to changes in religious belief, social structure, or simply carpentry fashion? Some scholars see a direct link between the height of headrest artistry and the peak of Egyptian magical religious fervor. Others argue practicality and material availability were the true drivers, with symbolism adapting to fit. The debate is as layered as the strata the headrests are pulled from. As you place the wooden headrest onto a padded tray, the groove where a real human head once lay feels profound. It connects you across millennia to a fundamental shared need: to lay down the weight, to seek rest, to hold the head aloft against the dark, whether earthly or eternal. The dust of ages clings to your gloves. Remember the crocodile dung sunscreen? Probably didn't survive in the archaeological record. But these hard, enduring headrests, they're the stubborn bones of daily life, refusing to be forgotten. They whisper of necks that ached, demons that were feared, and a simple, universal truth. Everyone, from pharaoh to potter, needed somewhere to rest their head. Even if it was rock, the variations go beyond mere aesthetics. Head into the western desert oases, fertile islands in a sea of sand like Baharia or Karga, and the headrests tell stories of isolation and adaptation. Here, the quirky, resourceful tidbit surfaces, oasis dwellers lacking abundant hardwoods or fine stone, sometimes crafted headrests from plastered bundles of reeds, molded around a simple wooden frame and coated in gypsum plaster for rigidity. Imagine resting your head not on cool stone, but on a hardened, reed-wrapped lump, painted perhaps with simple geometric designs in ochre or blue. It's the ancient equivalent of macrame meets concrete, ingenious, locally sourced, and probably just as unforgiving as granite. Did they stuff fragrant desert herbs into the reeds before plastering, creating a permanent aromatic core? The thought lingers, a whisper of ingenuity, against the vast silence of the dunes. Even the height varied subtly. Some regions favored lower, more stable platforms. Others, perhaps influenced by different sleeping postures or local beliefs about spinal alignment, crafted slightly taller columns, forcing a more pronounced lift of the chin. Your own neck twinges sympathetically just thinking about the experimental phase. Try the new Karga Special, now with 20% more jaw tension. But what drove these subtle shifts in design? Were they conscious expressions of regional identity, like different pottery styles or local deities? This is where the scholarly debate packs its bags for a theoretical journey down the Nile. Historians still argue whether these regional variations primarily reflected deep-seated cultural preferences and local artistic traditions, or whether they were pragmatic responses to environmental factors and material availability. Did a Theban carpenter choose a more elegant curve because it was the Theban way, imbued with local aesthetic values passed down through generations of artisans? Or was it simply that the harder acacia wood available in the south allowed for finer, more confident carving than the softer delta woods, leading naturally to more elaborate forms? Did the reed and plaster headrests of the oasis stem from a unique oasis cultural identity, or were they born purely of necessity? No good stone, limited hardwood, forcing innovation with what was at hand? Was the slightly taller style near Nubian borders a deliberate nod to southern neighbors, a subtle cultural borrowing, or just a coincidence born of shared materials and techniques? The debate flows like the Nile itself, carrying multiple possibilities. Some scholars see distinct cultural fingerprints in the curves and proportions. Others see the invisible hand of environment and economics shaping form, with cultural meaning layered on afterwards. As you compare a sturdy, no-nonsense Delta limestone rest with a sinuous, almost flamboyant Theban acacia piece, the distinction feels both obvious and frustratingly blurred. The Delta piece feels grounded, dependable. The Theban piece feels performative, confident. But is that them, or just the stone and wood talking? Did the farmer in the Delta feel a pang of headrest envy looking at his cousin's fancy Theban model? Probably not. He was too busy ensuring his didn't sink into the marshier soil. Remember the crocodile dung sunscreen? Recipe probably varied by region too. The point was to repel, not win beauty contests. Function, as always, ruled the night, even if the form had a local accent. Sleep tight, wherever you are. Hope your neck approves of the local style. The familiar curve of the Egyptian headrest feels almost comforting now, a known, if unyielding companion. But as your gaze drifts southward, following the languid flow of the Nile beyond Egypt's traditional borders, the forms shift, evolve, whisper of a shared human need, interpreted through different hands. You're not in Memphis or Thebes anymore. You're in the kingdom of Kush in Nubia, where the air shimmers with a fiercer heat, the landscape a tapestry of russet cliffs and emerald riverbanks. Here, nestled within a mud brick home, or perhaps a royal palace complex at Napata, you encounter a headrest. Yet it's not quite the same. The mainstream historical fact emerges like a desert mirage, resolving into stone. Cultures across ancient Africa independently developed or adopted and adapted the rigid headrest tradition. The Nubians, Egypt's powerful southern neighbors and sometimes rulers, were masters of the form. Their headrests share the core architecture, the curved cradle, the central support, the stabilizing base, but often possess a distinct, bold aesthetic. Think heavier, more monumental forms, carved from dense, dark ebony or gleaming ivory. The curves can be broader, more muscular. The central column might flare dramatically at the top and bottom, creating a powerful, almost architectural silhouette. The craftsmanship is superb, rivaling the finest Egyptian work. But the language of the carving speaks a different dialect. Geometric patterns, intricate zigzags, rhythmic chevrons, precise dot clusters. Replace the Egyptian lotus and wedjant eyes. It's a visual rhythm echoing the stark landscapes and vibrant artistic traditions south of the First Cataract. Your fingers trace the cool ebony. It feels denser, perhaps, than Egyptian acacia. The pattern's a subtle braille of cultural identity under your touch. Familiar, yet distinctly other. The variations aren't just skin deep. Venture further south, beyond Kush, into the lands of Punt, or deeper into the African interior, and the headrest tradition branches into fascinating forms. The quirky, evocative tidbit. In some regions, headrests became portable thrones for the head. Imagine miniature stools intricately carved with animal legs, lions, gazelles, even giraffes, supporting the curved platform. Others might feature stylized human figures bent at the waist, their backs forming the support column, their heads or hands cradling the sleeper's head. It's functional art imbued with potent symbolism, connecting the sleeper to the animal kingdom, to ancestors, to the very earth. Picture a nomadic herder in the Ethiopian highlands packing a delicate giraffe-legged headrest carved from fragrant cedar, a tiny, essential piece of home carried across vast savannas, or a village elder resting their head on the bent back of a carved ancestor figure, a tangible link to lineage and protection through the vulnerable night. The Egyptian concern with pest control and coolness remains, but layered with rich animist beliefs and a profound connection to the living world. Your own Egyptian acacia block suddenly feels starkly minimalist, almost impersonal in comparison. Did Egyptian traders, venturing south for ebony, ivory, and incense, see these forms and think them bizarrely ornate or strangely beautiful? The cultural exchange flowed both ways, a slow current carrying ideas up and down the great river. But how deep did this shared tradition run? Was it diffusion or parallel invention born of similar needs? This is where the scholarly debate sets up camp beneath a lone acacia tree on the savannah edge. Historians still argue fiercely whether the rigid headrest traditions found across vast stretches of Africa, from Nubia down through East Africa and into parts of West and Southern Africa, represent the spread of a specific cultural idea originating from a single source like Egypt, or whether they arose independently in multiple regions responding to shared environmental pressures and the fundamental human desire for elevation, coolness, and protection during sleep. Did the concept ripple out from the Nile Valley like concentric circles in water, carried by trade, migration, and conquest? Or did different cultures, facing similar challenges, sweltering heat, crawling insects, the vulnerability of sleep, arrive independently at remarkably similar solutions using their local materials and artistic vocabularies? The evidence is a mosaic. Similarities in form suggest possible connection. Stark differences in style and symbolism suggest local innovation. Some scholars point to trade routes as transmission belts for the idea. Others argue the basic need was so universal that the form emerged spontaneously, repeatedly, like pyramids or certain tool types. Was the Nubian love for geometric patterns an adaptation of Egyptian motifs filtered through a local lens, or a purely indigenous expression? Did the animal-legged headrests of deeper Africa inspire anything north of the cataracts, or were they a parallel universe of design? The debate is vast and complex as the continent itself. As you compare the sturdy elegance of a Kushite ebony headrest with its geometric dance to the whimsical, profound animal forms from further south, the question lingers. Necessity may be the mother of invention, but culture is the artist that sculpts her children. Whether born of shared ancestry or shared circumstance, the headrest stands as a silent testament to a continent-wide understanding. The head must be held aloft, guarded, given its own small throne in the dark. Remember the crocodile dung sunscreen? Probably not a hit south of Elephantine, but the fundamental need to protect the body, that, it seems, was universal. Sleep well wherever your head rests. Hope the giraffe legs are sturdy. The museum's storeroom's chill fades, replaced by the dry, shifting winds of the Egyptian landscape itself. You're no longer looking at a single headrest, but dozens, laid out like a silent symposium across a vast imaginary table. From the rich black soil of the delta to the sun-blasted rocks of Aswan, a subtle pattern emerges. They're all recognizably headrests, the curve, the column, the base. But like dialects of the same language, they speak with distinct regional accents. The mainstream historical fact becomes a geography lesson. Headrest styles weren't uniform across ancient Egypt's sprawling kingdoms. In the lush, marsh-fringed delta, headrests often leaned towards simpler, blockier forms, frequently carved from local Nile siltstone or softer woods like tamarisk. Functional, pragmatic, echoing the busy, trade-heavy life of the north. Travel south, towards Thebes and Upper Egypt, and the designs grow bolder. Curves become more pronounced, sometimes almost flared, echoing the elegant lines seen in temple architecture. Hardwoods, like acacia and imported ebony, were favored, allowing for finer, more confident carving. Nubian influence whispers in some Upper Egyptian styles. Slightly taller columns, more dynamic angles, a subtle reflection of the cultural exchange and occasional conquest. Along the Nile's southern frontier, your fingers ghosting over the imagined collection feel the difference. The delta stone feels cool but slightly porous, gritty. The Theban acacia is dense, smooth, almost alive under the touch. Comfort might still be elusive, but regional pride was carved into every angle. The variations go beyond mere aesthetics. Head into the western desert oases, fertile islands in a sea of sand like Baharia or Karga. And the headrests tell stories of isolation and adaptation. Here, the quirky, resourceful tidbit surfaces. Oasis dwellers, lacking abundant hardwoods or fine stone, sometimes crafted headrests from plastered bundles of reeds, molded around a simple wooden frame and coated in gypsum plaster for rigidity. Imagine resting your head not on cool stone, but on a hardened, reed-wrapped lump, painted perhaps with simple geometric designs in ochre or blue. It's the ancient equivalent of macrame meets concrete, ingenious, locally sourced, and probably just as unforgiving as granite. Did they stuff fragrant desert herbs into the reeds before plastering, creating a permanent, aromatic core? The thought lingers, a whisper of ingenuity against the vast silence of the dunes. Even the height varied subtly. Some regions favored lower, more stable platforms. Others, perhaps influenced by different sleeping postures or local beliefs about spinal alignment, crafted slightly taller columns, forcing a more pronounced lift of the chin. Your own neck twinges sympathetically just thinking about the experimental phase. Try the new Karga Special, now with 20% more jaw tension. But what drove these subtle shifts in design? Were they conscious expressions of regional identity, like different pottery styles or local deities? This is where the scholarly debate packs its bags for a theoretical journey down the Nile. Historians still argue whether these regional variations primarily reflected deep-seated cultural preferences and local artistic traditions, or whether they were pragmatic responses to environmental factors and material availability. Did a Theban carpenter choose a more elegant curve because it was the Theban way, imbued with local aesthetic values passed down through generations of artisans? Or was it simply that the harder acacia wood available in the south allowed for finer, more confident carving than the softer delta woods, leading naturally to more elaborate forms? Did the reed and plaster headrests of the oases stem from a unique oasis cultural identity? Or were they born purely of necessity? No good stone, limited hardwood, forcing innovation with what was at hand. Was the slightly taller style near Nubian borders a deliberate nod to southern neighbors, a subtle cultural borrowing, or just a coincidence born of shared materials and techniques? The debate flows like the Nile itself, carrying multiple possibilities. Some scholars see distinct cultural fingerprints in the curves and proportions. Others see the invisible hand of environment and economics shaping form, with cultural meaning layered on afterwards. As you compare the sturdy, no-nonsense Delta limestone rest with a sinuous, almost flamboyant Theban acacia piece, the distinction feels both obvious and frustratingly blurred. The Delta piece feels grounded, dependable. The Theban piece feels performative, confident. But is that them, or just the stone and wood talking? Did the farmer in the Delta feel a pang of headrest envy looking at his cousin's fancy Theban model? Probably not. He was too busy ensuring his didn't sink into the marshier soil. Remember the crocodile dung sunscreen? Recipe probably varied by region too. The point was to repel, not win beauty contests. Function, as always, ruled the night, even if the form had a local accent. Sleep tight, wherever you are. Hope your neck approves of the local style. The giraffe-legged headrest from distant savannas fades, replaced by the sterile glow of a smartphone screen illuminating your face in the modern dark. You're scrolling, endlessly scrolling, past ads promising revolutionary sleep. Orthopedic memory foam contours to your unique cervical curve. Gel-infused cooling technology for deep, rejuvenating rest. Quantum-infused crystals harmonizing your biofield. You glance sideways at your own pillow, a puffy monument to space-age polymers. Then think back to that simple, brutal curve of Egyptian acacia wood. The mainstream historical fact suddenly feels like a quiet accusation. The ancient Egyptians, millennia ago, were arguably the original ergonomic innovators. Their rigid headrests weren't just about elevation or magic. They were designed with a profound, if unyielding, awareness of the spine. Tomb paintings don't show pharaohs or farmers slumped. They show them aligned. Ear, shoulder, hip, a clean straight line enforced by that ungiving cradle. Their technology was stone and wood. Their clinical trials lasted generations, and their marketing was carved into the walls of eternity. Keep thy spine straight, lest thy caw wander crookedly. Your modern pillow, for all its space-age foam and NASA-inspired gels, often leaves you folded like chasing a comfort that sometimes feels elusive. The pressure point behind your ear throbs sympathetically in memory. Maybe the Egyptians were onto something besides demon repellent. The parallels are irresistible, bordering on absurd. Modern ergonomic pillows boast neck support columns and contoured cradles. Sound familiar? Swap carved acacia for viscoelastic polymer, and the basic architecture, a central support elevating a curved platform, is eerily similar. The quirky, slightly cynical tidbit: some high-end modern orthopedic pillows cost more than a solid block of Egyptian alabaster would have back in the day, adjusted for inflation. Imagine paying $300 for a fancy foam wedge Pharaoh Senusret III could have replicated for free with a handy chunk of desert granite and a tolerably skilled stonemason. The marketing language mirrors ancient concerns too. Where Egyptians invoked spells against decapitation demons, modern ads warn of tech neck, spinal misalignment, and the dreaded degenerative disc disease, promising salvation through scientifically engineered foam contours. The demons have traded leathery wings for blue light and bad posture, but the fear of bodily decay in the night remains potent. You fluff your gel pillow, searching for that mythical perfect alignment, wondering if the Egyptian farmer, once he got used to the rock, actually woke up with less stiffness than you do after 8 hours on memory foam. The irony is thick enough to carve, but was the Egyptian approach actually better or just different? This is where the scholarly debate gets a migraine. Historians, and chiropractors probably, still argue whether the rigid support promoted by ancient Egyptian headrests genuinely resulted in better long-term spinal health compared to softer, contouring supports, or whether it simply traded one set of potential issues, muscle strain, pressure points, for another, improved alignment, potentially reduced nerve compression in certain positions. Did generations of Egyptians develop stronger neck muscles and more stable cervical vertebrae thanks to their nightly resistance training on stone? Or did they suffer from chronic joint stress, arthritis, or specific pressure-induced ailments that simply didn't make it into the medical papyri? Was their perceived comfort, if they achieved it, a result of optimal biomechanics, or merely habituation to a hard surface? Modern ergonomics emphasizes customization, pressure distribution, and material give, concepts utterly alien to the monolithic Egyptian approach. The debate rages: is firm, unyielding support fundamentally superior for spinal integrity? Or is it a brutal relic of a time before foam and feathers, its benefits outweighed by modern understandings of tissue pressure and comfort? Some physiotherapists might nod approvingly at the Egyptian posture. Others might wince at the lack of cushioning. The truth likely lies buried deeper than any tomb, tangled in variables of individual physiology, lifestyle, and millennia of lost medical data. As you try to mimic the Egyptian side-sleeping posture shown in tomb paintings, your gel pillow squishing obligingly, you feel a familiar twinge in your shoulder. The acacia wood block, for all its faults, never pretended to be anything but what it was: hard, simple, and utterly committed to keeping your head up. No gel beads, no quantum crystals, just gravity, geometry, and the stubborn belief that straight was safe. Remember the crocodile dung sunscreen? Probably didn't have an SPF rating either. Sometimes, ancient simplicity cuts through the modern noise, leaving you wondering if the real revolution is just remembering to keep your head above the metaphorical scorpions. Sweet dreams. Hope your biofield is harmonized. The cool, unyielding certainty of stone or wood seems almost comforting compared to the chaos unfolding around you now. Desperation, it seems, is the mother of truly terrible inventions. You've tried the headrest. Your neck aches, your jaw throbs, and the promise of spinal alignment feels like a pyramid builder's cruel joke. So, you eye the resources at hand, the everyday detritus of Nile life, and think, surely there's a softer way. The mainstream historical fact hangs like a damp reed. While rigid headrests dominated, evidence suggests ancient Egyptians did experiment with alternatives. They just weren't great. Imagine stuffing a rough linen sack with dried river grasses. Sounds promising? Until the stems poke through the weave like miniature spears, jabbing your temple with every turn. Or picture a half-rotten melon, hollowed out, slightly yielding, vaguely cool, until it collapses at 2 a.m., depositing your cheek into a pool of sticky, fermenting pulp and seeds. The quirky, slightly pathetic tidbit. Archaeologists occasionally find lunks of hardened mud or crude, sun-baked bricks in domestic debris near sleeping areas. Were these desperate DIY pillow attempts? A lumpy mud brick might offer some elevation, but the texture? Imagine crushed pottery shards glued to your face. Comfort wasn't just elusive. It was actively being assaulted by your bedding. Even folded linen, the obvious choice, proved problematic. Too thin to offer real cushioning, too expensive to waste in bulky folds, and in the heat, it trapped sweat like a swamp. Your quest for softness was hitting a wall, a literal mud brick wall. The failures weren't just physical, they were cultural. Softness, it turns out, was suspicious. Egyptians associated yielding materials with chaos, isfet, the opposite of the rigid, stable order, ma'at, embodied by stone, straight lines, and properly elevated heads. Stuffing your headrest? That felt decadent, unstable, un-Egyptian, like inviting the swirling sands of disorder into your sacred sleeping space. Picture a stern grandmother, clucking. "Pa, feathers? Next, you'll be sleeping on a cloud and expecting your ka to find its way home. Sit up straight, boy." Stone builds character. The headrest's rigidity wasn't just practical or magical. It was philosophically correct. A soft pillow wasn't just uncomfortable. It was morally dubious. Your half-hearted attempt to pad your wooden rest with a wad of papyrus reeds feels suddenly treasonous. The papyrus crunches, shifts, and offers all the support of a sigh. Defeated? Or nothing, always unfun. You shove it. But why didn't they develop plush pillows? With geese along the Nile and ample flax for linen, the materials existed. This is where the scholarly debate gets delightfully petty. Historians still argue whether the lack of soft pillows stemmed primarily from cultural aversion, the association of softness with chaos, practical limitations, stuffings like feathers or wool being prime targets for insects, mildew, and rot in the climate, or simply the overwhelming, multi-generational dominance of the rigid headrest ideal, stifling innovation. Was it a conscious rejection? We tried your fancy reed-stuffed sack, user calf, and it attracted beetles and made Aunt Merit sneeze. Back to granite. Or was it a slow suffocation of alternatives by tradition? The headrest worked well enough for its many purposes: magic, posture, coolness, pest control, making the messy, sweaty, bug-infested hassle of down or straw seem not worth the bother. Did some poor soul invent a semi-decent stuffed linen pillow, only to have it mold in the inundation season or get devoured by moths, cementing stone supremacy? The debate is a tangle of chicken and egg. Did culture prevent the innovation, or did the impracticality of alternatives reinforce the cultural preference? As you gingerly place your head back onto the bare wood, a single sharp date pit, somehow embedded in the reed mat, stabs your ear. You yelp. The headrest, impassive, offers no apology, only its familiar, unforgiving geometry. Softness might be chaos, but right now, chaos has a date pit and it's winning. Remember the crocodile dung sunscreen? At least it stayed put. Tonight you mourn the lost potential of Egyptian goose down. Stupid, beautiful, chaotic goose down. The date pit disaster is a fresh humiliation, the wood's unyielding curve a familiar, if grudging, sanctuary. Centuries blur. Dynasties rise and fall like the Nile's own rhythm. New Kingdom splendor fading, Persian conquest, the brief flash of native revival, then the heavy tread of Alexander's armies, the settling weight of Ptolemaic rule. Greek echoes mingle with hieroglyphs, Roman sandals scuff temple floors, once trod only by bare priestly feet. Through it all, the humble headrest doesn't vanish, not entirely. It lingers, a ghost in the craftsman's repertoire, a whisper of an older order. The mainstream historical fact settles like fine dust on a half-finished carving. While rigid headrests became less common in daily life under Greco-Roman influence, their form, their symbolism, stubbornly persisted in Egyptian crafts, especially those tethered to eternity. Skilled hands still knew the curve, the column, the base, not for sleeping heads, but for the dead and for the gods. Your fingers brush a fragment of painted wood in a Ptolemaic-era workshop, part of a miniature funerary model. There, amidst tiny bread loaves and beer jars, sits a perfectly scaled headrest beside a doll-sized mummy on its bier. The craftsmanship is delicate, precise, a nostalgic echo carved in sycamore fig. The need for physical elevation in sleep might be fading, replaced by softer Hellenistic habits, but the need for elevation in death? That remained sacrosanct. The headrest's journey from nightly necessity to eternal symbol was complete. The persistence isn't just miniature. Look at the vibrant, haunting mummy portraits from the Roman period. Those stunningly lifelike Fayum portraits painted on wood panels laid over the mummy's face. Beneath the painted gaze of a Romanized Egyptian woman with intricate gold jewelry, her mummified body still rests on a headrest. Often simpler now, perhaps just a curved wooden block, lacking the old magic spells, but retaining the essential form. It's a quiet cultural stubbornness. The quirky, poignant tidbit. Coptic Christian monks, centuries later, seeking extreme asceticism, were recorded sometimes using simple wooden headrests, not for comfort, but as tools of mortification, a deliberate echo of ancient austerity in service to a new god. Imagine a monk in the desert solitude of Scetis, lying not on a soft pallet, but on a hard mat, his head perched on a worn wooden rest, consciously mirroring the physical discipline of a distant past he might not fully understand, but whose forms lingered in the collective memory of the land. The object transcended its original gods, finding new purpose in denial and devotion. The curve endured. But was this lingering form truly meaningful or just hollow habit? This is where the scholarly debate sifts through the layers of cultural sediment. Historians still argue whether the continued presence of headrests in funerary contexts and crafts during the Greco-Roman and Coptic periods represented a deep, surviving belief in their original protective and symbolic power for the afterlife, or whether it had become merely a traditional artistic motif, a stylistic holdover, emptied of its original magical and practical significance. Did the Ptolemaic Egyptian placing that tiny headrest in the funerary model genuinely believe it still guarded the deceased's soul against decapitation in the duet, now syncretized with Greek Hades? Or was it simply the way things have always been done for burials, a comforting ritual formality, devoid of its old potency? Did the Coptic monk feel a connection to Imhotep or Pharaoh Djoser when he rested his head on wood? Or was it purely a borrowed shape for his own ascetic vocabulary? The debate hinges on intent, always the hardest thing to excavate. Some see a resilient thread of ancient belief woven into new tapestries. Others see cultural inertia, the persistence of form long after function and meaning have shifted or faded. As you examine a Roman-era mummy portrait, the woman's eyes stare out with startling modernity. Her drapery Greek, her jewelry Roman-Egyptian fusion. Below her painted face, unseen, rests the simple wooden curve. Is it a silent prayer to Osiris, Anubis, Serapis? Or just tradition? The answer lies buried with her, wrapped in linen and time. The craft endured, the hands remembered the shape. But the night whispered different fears, different hopes. The headrest remained, a familiar landmark on an increasingly foreign landscape. Remember the crocodile dung sunscreen? Probably replaced by olive oil and rosewater. Some traditions fade gently. Others, like the headrest's curve, simply refuse to be forgotten, even when their original sun has set. Sleep well, Lady of the Fayum. Hope the afterlife has decent neck support. The familiar curve of the headrest feels like an old, stubborn friend now. Reliable, austere, a relic of Ma'at in a world tilting off its axis. But then you hear it, the rhythmic tramp of legionary sandals on packed earth, the clatter of dice in a garrison tavern, the scent of garum and olive oil cutting through the dry Egyptian air. Rome has arrived, and with it, rolling off galleys crammed with amphorae and ambition, comes something unthinkable: softness. You're in Alexandria, a city where Greek agora meets Roman bathhouse meets Egyptian temple. In a modest courtyard home, a well-off merchant unrolls a new acquisition, a pulvinus. Not stone, not wood, linen stuffed with duck down. You press a hand into it. It yields. It gives, like sinking your fingers into warm Nile silt. The mainstream historical fact lands like a cushioned blow. Roman conquest introduced stuffed pillows to Egypt on a scale unimaginable before. These weren't rare luxuries. They became common fixtures in homes of those touched by Roman trade or taste. Wool, feathers, even crude foam from sea sponges. Suddenly, elevation didn't require spinal fortitude. Romans saw sleep as otium, leisure, not a nightly battle against demons and alignment. Comfort wasn't chaos. It was civilization. You watch the merchant fluff his pulvinus with a satisfied grin. No hieroglyphs, no spells against decapitation, just plump, indulgent softness. Your own acacia block suddenly feels like the shift is visceral. Roman villas sprout along the Nile, their triclinia, dining couches piled high with cushions. Even Egyptian elites, eager to impress Roman officials, trade ancestral headrests for imported plushness. The quirky, judgmental tidbit whispers from the shadows. Traditionalists viewed these pillows as moral poison. Imagine a stern priest muttering over his stone rest. Look at them, wallowing like fattened geese. Isis weeps. Their cause will drown in feathers before dawn. Softness wasn't just decadent, it was weak, un-Egyptian. A surrender to the formless, hedonistic chaos Romans seemed to trail like cheap perfume. You overhear a grandmother scolding her granddaughter. Feathers? Pah! In my day, we slept on granite and thanked the gods for strong necks. Now you'll dream of laziness and wake up with a spine like wet papyrus. The rigid headrest, gathering dust in a corner, radiates disapproval. But was this a clean swap? Hardly. The pragmatic reality bites. Roman pillows brought their own nightmares. The fringe downside? Down pillows were veritable insect motels. Mites, bedbugs, even moth larvae thrived in the warm, fibrous depths. Imagine drifting off to the scratch, scratch, scratch of tiny jaws feasting on duck fluff beneath your ear. Wool stuffing clumped and reeked of lanolin when damp. And sea sponge pillows? A gamble. Fresh, they smelled like low tide. Old, they crumbled into salty, pokey grit. One sneeze could unleash a cloud of ancient sponge dust. Salubrious Roman innovation, coughs a skeptic, batting away debris. Next, they'll tell us scorpions improve circulation. The acacia headrest, silent and scorpion-proof, suddenly seems hygienically superior. ... This cultural collision sparks the inevitable scholarly spat. Historians still argue whether the adoption of stuffed pillows represented genuine Egyptian preference for comfort or merely pragmatic assimilation into the Roman economic machine, a way to signal status, curry favor, or simply access cheaper, mass-produced goods. Did Egyptians truly embrace the squish, or did they tolerate it like imported wine, initially sour, then acquired? Was it liberation from spinal rigor or a loss of cultural identity wrapped in goose down? The debate is as lumpy as a poorly stuffed pulvinus. Some point to tomb finds. Traditional headrests persist in burials long after Roman pillows dominate homes, suggesting spiritual loyalty despite daily surrender. Others note how quickly Roman-style pillows appear in middle-class graves, proof the allure of softness transcended pragmatism. Perhaps it was both. Spines sighed in relief, while ancestral ghosts scowled. You witness a comedic stalemate in a hybrid household. A Roman merchant's Egyptian wife uses a down pillow atop her grandmother's wooden headrest. "Best of both worlds," she declares, perched like a nervous heron on a plinth of feathers and acacia. Soft and sacred. Her Roman husband shakes his head, sinking into a mountain of cushions. "Barbarians had firmer beds," he mutters, though he secretly admires her neck's impeccable posture. The children, blissfully unaware, nap on pure Roman fluff, dreaming of chariot races and zero pressure points. Progress, it seems, is a negotiated ceasefire between comfort and tradition. The familiar curve of the headrest feels like an old, stubborn friend now, reliable, austere, a relic of Ma'at in a world tilting off its axis. But then you hear it, the rhythmic tramp of legionary sandals on packed earth, the clatter of dice in a garrison tavern, the scent of garum and olive oil cutting through the dry Egyptian air. Rome has arrived, and with it, rolling off galleys crammed with amphorae and ambition, comes something unthinkable: softness. You're in Alexandria, a city where Greek agora meets Roman bathhouse meets Egyptian temple. In a modest courtyard home, a well-off merchant unrolls a new acquisition, a pulvinus. Not stone, not wood, linen stuffed with duck down. You press a hand into it. It yields, it gives, like sinking your fingers into warm Nile silt. The mainstream historical fact lands like a cushioned blow. Roman conquest introduced stuffed pillows to Egypt on a scale unimaginable before. These weren't rare luxuries. They became common fixtures in homes of those touched by Roman trade or taste. Wool, feathers, even crude foam from sea sponges. Suddenly, elevation didn't require spinal fortitude. Romans saw sleep as otium, leisure, not a nightly battle against demons and alignment. Comfort wasn't chaos, it was civilization. You watch the merchant fluff his pulvinus with a satisfied grin. No hieroglyphs, no spells against decapitation, just plump, indulgent softness. Your own acacia block, suddenly, dot. The shift is visceral. Roman villas sprout along the Nile, their triclinia, dining couches, piled high with cushions. Even Egyptian elites, eager to impress Roman officials, trade ancestral headrests for imported plushness. The quirky, judgmental tidbit whispers from the shadows. Traditionalists viewed these pillows as moral poison. Imagine a stern priest muttering over his stone rest. Look at them, wallowing like fattened geese. Isis weeps. Their caste will drown in feathers before dawn. Softness wasn't just decadent, it was weak, un-Egyptian. A surrender to the formless, hedonistic chaos Romans seemed to trail like cheap perfume. You overhear a grandmother scolding her granddaughter. Feathers? Pah! In my day, we slept on granite and thanked the gods for strong necks. Now you'll dream of laziness and wake up with a spine like wet papyrus. The rigid headrest gathering dust in a corner radiates disapproval. But was this a clean swap? Hardly. The pragmatic reality bites. Roman pillows brought their own nightmares. The fringe downside. Down pillows were veritable insect motels. Mites, bedbugs, even moth larvae thrived in the warm, fibrous depths. Imagine drifting off to the scratch, scratch, scratch of tiny jaws feasting on duck fluff beneath your ear. Wool stuffing clumped and reeked of lanolin when damp. And sea sponge pillows? A gamble. Fresh, they smelled like low tide. Old, they crumbled into salty, pokey grit. One sneeze could unleash a cloud of ancient sponge dust. Salubrious Roman innovation, coughs a skeptic, batting away debris. Next, they'll tell us scorpions improve circulation. The acacia headrest, silent and scorpion-proof, suddenly seems hygienically superior. This cultural collision sparks the inevitable scholarly spat. Historians still argue whether the adoption of stuffed pillows represented genuine Egyptian preference for comfort or merely pragmatic assimilation into the Roman economic machine, a way to signal status, curry favor, or simply access cheaper, mass-produced goods. Did Egyptians truly embrace the squish, or did they tolerate it like imported wine, initially sour, then acquired? Was it liberation from spinal rigor, or a loss of cultural identity wrapped in goose down? The debate is as lumpy as a poorly stuffed pulvinus. Some point to tomb finds. Traditional headrests persist in burials long after Roman pillows dominate homes, suggesting spiritual loyalty despite daily surrender. Others note how quickly Roman-style pillows appear in middle-class graves, proof the allure of softness transcended pragmatism. Perhaps it was both. Spines sighed in relief, while ancestral ghosts scowled. You witness a comedic stalemate in a hybrid household. A Roman merchant's Egyptian wife uses a down pillow atop her grandmother's wooden headrest. "Best of both worlds," she declares, perched like a nervous heron on a plinth of feathers and acacia. Soft and sacred. Her Roman husband shakes his head, sinking into a mountain of cushions. "Barbarians had firmer beds," he mutters, though he secretly admires her neck's impeccable posture. The children, blissfully unaware, nap on pure Roman fluff, dreaming of chariot races and zero pressure points. Progress, it seems, is a negotiated ceasefire, between comfort and tradition. As night falls, you face a choice. The acacia headrest, cool, clean, magically potent, demanding as a temple drill sergeant. Or the pulvinus, yielding, suspiciously rustling, smelling faintly of duck and distant lands. You hesitate. The Roman way promises ease, but at what cost? Where are the spells, the elevation against scorpions, the satisfying thunk of order beneath your skull? Outside, a legionary's lyre plays a Greek tune. Inside, the past and present tussle over your cervical vertebrae. Remember the crocodile dung sunscreen? Outmoded, but gloriously unambiguous. This pillow? It's a cloud with consequences. Sweet dreams? Maybe, but keep one ear open for mites. The pulvinus whispers promises of Roman ease, its downy surface yielding like a sigh. Yet your fingers trace the acacia headrest's unbroken curve, cool, austere, a relic of Ma'at in a world unmoored. This isn't just a choice between stone and feathers. It's a crossroads where eternity meets ephemeral comfort. The rigid rest endures, not in the bustling Roman villas, but in the quiet persistence of memory, craft, and earth itself. The mainstream historical fact anchors you. For over 3,000 years, the headrest was Egypt's silent sleep companion. From pre-dynastic graves to Ptolemaic tomb models, its form outlasted pyramids, gods, and empires. Its legacy isn't in museums alone. It's etched in the human story of seeking dignity in rest. That groove worn into wood? It's the signature of generations who chose elevation over surrender, who understood that some comforts are deeper than softness. The echoes linger in unexpected places. The quirky modern tidbit? Today, niche artisans craft ergonomic stone headrests for wellness seekers, marketing them as pharaonic posture correctors. Biohackers extol sleeping on jade slabs, while minimalist designers fetishize brutalist headrests for spinal authenticity. An Egyptian farmer's necessity, reborn as luxury asceticism. Irony thick enough to carve into calcite. Meanwhile, in remote Sudanese villages, elderly women still use grandmother's ebony headrests, not for tradition, but because wood sleeps cooler than foam. The past isn't dead. It's folded into the present, whispering through choices we barely understand. Yet the debate over its essence remains unresolved. Historians still argue whether the headrest's millennia-long dominance stemmed from profound cultural spiritual conviction or mere inertia. A technology so adequate, so interwoven with magic and medicine, that innovation felt unnecessary. Was it reverence or rigidity? Did they cling to stone because it worked, or because to abandon it was to risk chaos seeping into the sacred geometry of sleep? The answer dances just beyond reach, like a desert mirage. You lie back, suspended between worlds. Roman down cradles your cheek. Egyptian wood waits on the floor, radiating silent challenge. Outside, Alexandria's night hums with foreign tongues and familiar stars. The demons of the duat feel distant now, replaced by subtler fears of lost identity, of spines gone soft, of dreams untethered from the soil that birthed them. You think of the farmer who rested here millennia ago, his head on stone, trusting its chill to fend off scorpions and spectral decapitators. His faith was in weight, in spell-carved rock, in the alignment of bone and cosmos. Your faith? It's in duck feathers and the Pax Romana. Both, perhaps, are acts of defiance against the dark. A breeze stirs the linen curtain, carrying the Nile's damp breath. You close your eyes. The pulvinus accepts your weight, forgiving, indulgent. But in your mind's eye, you see the headrest, not as artifact, but as companion. It was there when the first stones of Giza were laid. It witnessed Cleopatra's ambitions and Caesar's fall. It cradled scribes, potters, priests, and children whose names are lost to wind. It asked for nothing but a little fortitude and offered in return coolness, straightness, a bulwark against the crawling night. No plush illusion, just honest, unyielding presence. The Roman pillow is soft, too soft. It swallows your ear, muffling the world. You miss the clarity of stone, the way it pressed truth into your temple. You are here. You are alive. You endure. Down is a cloud, but clouds disperse. Stone remains. Slowly, you slide a hand beneath the pillow, fingers seeking solid ground. Your knuckles brush the floor. Packed earth, timeless, immutable. The gesture feels like a covenant. Above, the down. Below, the dust. Between them, you. The night deepens, wrapping around you like linen bandages, preserving something precious and fleeting. Alexandria's distant murmur softens to a lullaby. Waves hushing harbor walls, a lone flute painting notes on silence. Breathe in. The scent of river mud, aged papyrus, a hint of cedar from a merchant's shuttered stall. Breathe out. The tension in your jaw, the weight of centuries, the absurdity of choosing between stone and feathers. Let it all dissolve. Imagine the Nile outside, dark and patient, flowing as it flowed when headrests were new. It carried the same stars we see now, the same moon that silvered Pharaoh's dreams. Those stars watched over farmers resting on wood, queens on ivory, monks on penitential planks. They witness you now, adrift on Roman down, yet tethered to the same human need, to lay down the day, to trust the dark, to rise again. Feel the cool air kiss your forehead. No demons stir tonight, no scorpions scuttle, only peace, thick and honeyed, pooling in the spaces between thoughts. Your body sinks, not into mattress or memory, but into the arms of the earth itself, the same earth that cradled acacia roots, swallowed temples, and remembers every head that ever sought rest upon it. You are safe. You are held. The journey ends where it began, in the quiet certainty that rest is your birthright, whether guarded by stone or feathers, or the simple courage to close your eyes. Let your breath slow. Match its rhythm to the fan's whir, the wave's sigh, the pulse of the sleeping city. Drift down, down, past history, past choice, past the need to understand. There is only this: darkness, warmth, and the gentle, unending promise of dawn.